Thank you for being here. Today is the second day of the 7th Women of the World Festival for the first time in Lahore. I hope you all were here yesterday. We had a fantastic day with a lot of rain and ice falling from the skies, but we managed. And so happy to be here. Today's panel, this one, is with these special ladies right here who are going to talk about Diaspora Dosti. That's the title of the panel. And it's about how friendships grow when you are raised differently in a different country. We have with us Dr. Sophia. I don't have the full names, but Dr. Sophia, who is an independent scholar of Islam and gender and knowledge building consultant at Musawwa Movement. And we have Sabina, who is the head of projects and programs at WOW UK. And she's a writer and editor of this wonderful book that's in my hands. It's called Cut from the Same Cloth. And it's a compilation of essays of Muslim women about life in Britain. And it caught my eye because they're like these lines, stereotypical lines that they get, when you start wearing a hijab or you're representing the Muslim community. Do you wear that at home? Where are you really from? Does he make you wear that? Do you believe in British values? Can I see your hair? Can you be a feminist? Why don't you just take it off? Do you wear that in the shower? Are you oppressed? I'm sure this book doesn't answer these questions, but it deals with all the issues around it. So let me just hand over the stage to these two wonderful ladies to take the discussion forward.
Thank you, Amna, for that lovely introduction, and to WOW for having us, and to all of you for being here. So I'm Dr. Sophia Rahman, and this is my beautiful friend Sabina Akhtar, who I have never ever had an argument with, but we almost just had our first fight over who's going to kick off today's panel. So here I am, she won. I'm going to begin by introducing actually Sabina in a little bit more detail, if I may. As you know, she is a writer, an editor, and cut from the same cloth. Question mark, it's a question that, are we all cut from the same cloth? This was her debut anthology, which I had the pleasure of contributing to as well. She is also an award-winning arts and culture programmer working across a variety of festivals, and her work largely focuses on platforming marginalized communities with a particular focus on race and gender. She is the head of projects and programs at the WOW Foundation, working on its UK output and programmed the Shameless Festival, a festival of activism against sexual violence. She was the festival coordinator for Bear Lit, the UK's principal festival celebrating remarkable writers in the diaspora. She's also a co-founder of the Prima Donna Festival, which spotlights the work of women writers, the Prima Donna Prize for Writing, and Bear Lit Kids, the UK's first children's festival showcasing the work of writers of colour. She has published a wide variety of work, including editing Cut from the Same Cloth, talking about Islamophobia, published by Hachette, and is currently working on a novel, which I am forever bugging her about because I know it's going to be awesome when it comes out. And she's also a mum of 4, so she's an absolutely incredible individual who juggles many things. You can find her tweeting at Poco Book Reader, and you can also find her on Instagram as Bina_books.
Thank you, Sophia. It's funny that we have to read out each other's bios. I feel like I know everything about Soph, but when it comes to actually, I know the stories behind how we got to these books and accolades, but reading them out, I need to check. Okay, so Dr. Sophia Rahman is an independent scholar specializing in Islam and gender. She's an author and an educator. She's the founder and coordinator of Leeds Lit Book Club, which is now in its 9th year. During the global pandemic, she launched the Islam and Gender Read-Alongs, facilitating readings of academic texts penned by Muslim female scholars in conversation with global virtual audiences. And she has been featured in Vogue Arabia, Refinery 29, and The Independent. She is the author of a treasury of Aisha bint Abu Bakr and recently published title, engendering the Hadith tradition, recentering the authority of Aisha, mother of the believers. She is a contributor to a number of anthologies, including Mapping Faiths, Theologies of Migration, cut from the same cloth, Violet Phenomena, 21 essays on translations edited by Kavita Banot. And you can connect with her on Instagram, as many of you might have already done, at Sophia_reading, where she talks about all things related to books, faith, and academia. So should we begin by just talking about how we met? I think the title of this is interesting because we're in Pakistan now. We both live in London, but in Pakistan, we're just Dosti. In Pakistan, we're Diaspora Dosti, but at home, we're just friends. Diaspora doesn't come into it. Maybe we should talk a bit about how we first met.
Yeah, so we were talking about this earlier, like what's the diaspora element of our friendship? You know, it's not something that we necessarily think about. But Sabina and I grew up, you know, our sort of coming of age happened in the 90s. And I think it was at a point where we'd both visited back home. We'd been to Pakistan many, many times. We were born and raised in the UK. So you come to a point in your identity formation where you start to ask, well, who am I? Not only as a result of the location in which I am born and raised, but also in opposition to the location in which I am born and raised. And also, likewise, my country of origin. And so, like most good little British Pakistani kids of the 90s, we actually we found each other in the masjid. So we'd gone for Jummah, and I remember seeing this bright little face in the congregation smiling over at me, and I thought, oh, I like her face. And that's how we became friends. But I think the beauty, what's allowed the longevity of our friendship is the fact that we've always valued each other's thoughts and how we've developed. We've held space for each other to be able to explore ideas, to question the world that we live in, our place in the world, and our forms of resistance that we've taken up. But also we're a place of refuge for each other. I know that if I am weary and my bones need resting, that a call to Sabina will provide that in an otherwise quite often hostile world. So whether that's as a newly married, woman trying to navigate this new space of, in-laws and husband and then children, or whether that was in having my children grow up and me start to think about who am I and what do I want to contribute to the world, and, making my way back into education and doing a master's and then a PhD. And Sabina was so vital in that period of my life as well, because, she provided support that nobody else really could. She'd ring me up and say, right, I'm taking your kids and you are only going to write for 3 hours or 4 hours or however long you want. So our friendship has gone from teenagers in the masjid trying to figure out who we are in the world and what our place is, to women who have forged their place in the world and continue to do so, and are sustained by the love and the confidence that our friendship gives us.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautifully put. You can tell who the academic is and the other one. I will just add as well, I think we've had so many iterations of ourselves during the course of our friendship. So if you think about meeting as teenagers, I think probably one aspect that where diaspora comes into it is that, the way I was raised in my family is that my family are very open-minded, they're very liberal. I had no preconceived notions or ideas put upon me of who I should be and what my place in the world was. And I was forging those myself. And like Soph said, we met in the mosque, and we've helped, I think, shaped each other into the women we've become, and also been like vital sounding boards for ideas and dreams. So when I sit here and I introduce, Dr. Sophia with her PhD and her many publications, I think in the back of my mind of the first tentative conversations we had, like, do you think I could do a master's? Do you think I should apply for this? And we were both mothers, and we kind of had a conversation where my youngest child was about to go into nursery, and I was like, I think when my youngest child goes into nursery, I'm going to try and either pursue further education or get into the workplace, because we were both stay-at-home mothers. And so I've said I'm going to try and do a master's, and we've supported each other through that. And I think, yes, we have loving families and husbands and children, but there's a support system that you get from women and the sisters in your lives that is unlike any other. And I think that's what's special about our friendship, is that we don't put pressure on each other, but we know when to pick each other up quite well.
Definitely. There's, I don't know if people are fans of Toni Morrison. I'm sure there are lots of fans of Toni Morrison. But in her book, Beloved, there's a quote that I often associate with Sabina. I'm going to read it out. It says, "She is a friend of mind. She's a friend of my mind. She gather me, man. The pieces I am, she gather them and give them back to me in all the right order. It is good, you know, when you got a woman who is a friend of your mind." And that's exactly what Sabina's been for me. And I think to be a friend of the mind is so profound, because in a world where we now have increasing rates of women being diagnosed with all sorts of mental health issues, whether that's depression or whether that's, issues like ADHD, or, I feel like women are often pathologized rather than being asked the question of, well, is it the environment? Is there something in the context that needs changing, rather than saying, what's wrong with this woman's brain? And so to have a friend who is a friend of your mind and who reminds you that actually there's a lot of gaslighting in the world, especially as a brown Muslim woman trying to do certain things or just existing, to have someone say, you know what, actually, you're just right. It's the world that we've got to fight. And it's not necessarily even always in those moments. It'll be moments like when my father passed away 2 years ago. And it was sudden, it was unexpected, and everything happened within 24 hours. I live in a different city to my parents, and I got a call saying, Dad's fallen, he's in hospital, maybe make your way over. I was like, okay, he'll be fine. My dad is never gonna die, right? Like, that was just not on the mind. And I remember taking the train trip down. It was about 3 hours, got down to London, and then everything very quickly just declined. And I came out of the hospital the next day having said goodbye to my father, and I just remember being in a daze and feeling like I was having an out-of-body experience. And I was angry at the world for just carrying on as normal, strangers on the street laughing with one another, I thought was so offensive. And then I got home, and within an hour, she was in my mum's house making us all tea. And it's such a small act, but it was an act that brought me back into my body, and it brought me back into reality. And she's a friend of my mind, my heart, my soul. And I think that kind of friendship is so rare, but when we find it, it's so, it's unlike anything else. And we're so imprinted on each other. And I remember when Sabina first came to me and she said, this was back, does everybody remember when David Cameron said that Muslim women were traditionally submissive? And she was mad, and she was fighting people on Twitter. And then she came to me and she said, got to do something about this. And that's where the story of Cut from the Same Cloth begins. So I'm going to pass it over to you. So tell us about the start of Cut from the Same Cloth.
Thank you, Soph. I think as well, you can tell, Soph and I, we're like chalk and cheese in some ways. So where she is, reflective and kind and beautiful and loves to bring people along on a journey with her, I am the shouty Twitter, getting into arguments type of friend. And that's how this book arose. I was just really sick to death of people telling me as a Muslim woman how I should behave, or projecting their ideas of how they think I should behave onto me. And that comes from everywhere. I mean, probably, even here in Pakistan, I hate to say it to you guys, but, you guys have also got some elitist problems when it comes to thinking about how we should behave. And, how we are as third culture kids. So I was mad, and I decided to get a group of Muslim women together that represented the Muslim community that I know. So, there are disabled Muslims in this book. There are working class Muslims. There are people who speak English as a second language. There are Black women. There are women from all walks of life in this book, because that's what Islam is, and that's what it represents to me, and I know to Sophia. And really, it was a galvanizing moment that we just captured and managed to get out. But the process to publication was hard. And Soph was always there to kind of listen through that process. She talked about navigating whiteness, navigating privilege, being in a space that we weren't entirely welcome in publishing. So she was always there for me throughout that process. And she wrote a fantastic essay, which I would advise you all to please read and check out her other work. But that brings me, Soph, to your work. Because like I said, you've always thought about bringing people along with you for the journey. Whereas I'm more like, yeah, I'll take this one. The rest of you can sort yourselves out. Soph has always thought about community. And I think the work that you do now, although it's academic and you're dealing with texts, 14th century texts that would have otherwise been lost, you're making it accessible and you're bringing a group and a community of women around you. And I wondered if you could talk to that.
Thank you. Thanks, Sabina. Yeah, so amongst our conversations back when we were talking for hours on the phone whilst folding laundry, I'd mentioned to Sabina that I really wanted to go back to university. So I'd studied sort of Islam more traditionally. I studied in madrasas in Syria and then privately in Turkey and so on and so forth. And now that my children were starting school, I wanted to enter into academia and do a master's in Islamic studies, Middle Eastern and Islamic studies, and then possibly progress onto a PhD, which I did. And so for my PhD, I did a critical study and partial translation of a 14th century text by a scholar called Imam al-Zarkashi. And his work, this particular text of his, is called Al-Ijaba, which means the corrective or the response. And it was a collection of about 400 statements of Aisha bint Abi Bakr, radiallahu anha, who many of you will know, was the wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what was so profound about this collection of hadith is that they were almost inevitably corrections of Aisha's, of predominantly male companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whom she was either correcting or refuting, and sometimes corroborating as well. So I did that for my PhD. And whilst I was doing that, there's a fantastic independent Islamic publishers called Cube. And they do a series, it's a treasury series. And part of this treasury, what this treasury series is made up of is a book on a single subject, and it'll have like 40 statements, either that are key to that Islamic science or that are by a particular scholar. And they bring in an expert to write that, contribution to the series. And so my husband had done one on Ibn Taymiyyah. He'd written a treasury of Ibn Taymiyyah for Cube. And I sat with him one morning and I said, you know what, I'm going to get in touch with Cube and I'm going to say to them that you don't have any contributors who are female, and none of your books are about a female. So I'm going to tell them, let's put that to right. I'll write a treasury of hadith, so 40 statements of Aisha with my commentary, so you'll knock out two birds with one stone. And how they say, subhanAllah, straight from your mouth right to the heavens. It was a moment like that because we finished brunch and I opened up my laptop and I actually had an email from Cube already saying, we'd like to invite you to write a treasury of hadith for Aisha. So that was published last February. I've taken 40 hadith of Aisha's and given a brief commentary on each of them. And then more recently, just a couple of weeks ago, my PhD thesis was also published by Oxford University Press in the UK. That is, as Sabina said earlier, it's entitled Gendering the Hadith Tradition. Thank you. Recentering the voice of our mother Aisha. So it's been an amazing journey. And that particular text as well, I feel like I've had a really long relationship with it. So I first got that book when I was out in Syria. I knew rudimentary Arabic. And my husband had been studying there for a few years already. He was an advanced student of Islamic studies. And we were in some like obscure bookstore in Damascus. And he got really excited at the sight of some book, which I could only decipher the word Aisha and Sahaba in the title. I couldn't really tell what else the title was saying. And my husband put that book in my hand and said, "You're going to translate this book one day." And I thought, okay, good luck with reading it first. So in a sense, and I bring that story in because, friendships are vital, but, also who you're married to makes or breaks the trajectory of your life too.
Sure, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. We haven't got much time, and we can sit up here singing each other's praises for a long time. So I wonder if anyone actually has any questions.
Yeah, I didn't.
We can hear you.
Yes.
I can hear you. I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
I think that's a really clever question, actually. Yeah, I like that. So if I've understood that correctly, so like in the same sense that those of us in diaspora have sort of created this third space where we've developed, the digital online space is also providing a third space for teenagers here that are also still developing. That is a really profound question and a great insight. I do think that there's a lot more blending going on in the world, and the internet has certainly shrunk our world even more. I mean, we all get each other's jokes in a way that when I was visiting Pakistan like 15 years ago, I was not understanding my cousins' jokes and they were not understanding mine because our points of popular cultural reference were so different. And like today now, the WOW folk have got on the back of their t-shirts, just looking like a vow. And we all get it, right? We all get it. And I think the internet has done something so beautiful there in that it's crossed this bridge that otherwise, crossed this distance that was otherwise difficult to traverse sometimes. However, having said that, I do think that the internet is a place that you have to navigate with some caution as well. I don't think that the internet is necessary. I mean, we all know, don't we, that especially for women, the dangers of the internet, the filters and the perfected bodies and the perfected lifestyles that we're fed and sort of the mental health issues that can come out of that. So I think it's a mixed bag, and I think that definitely it's created it's shrunk the distance between us. But there are a lot of people whose who are not fairly represented. We know about sort of shadow banning, and we know, I think especially in the last 5 months, with a lot of us campaigning and actively speaking about what's happening in Palestine. I mean, those of us, who've otherwise had great reach on all social media platforms, suddenly found ourselves banned. We were not being shown to people who needed to hear that stuff. The worst thing that the internet has given us is echo chambers. So if our content is shown to others, it's people who already think like us. So I think that the internet's done a great thing in providing opportunities for bridge building, but it's also closed us all off into our own echo chambers. And I'll tell you what, when we had the vote on Brexit, when we had Trump being voted in, when we had Jeremy Corbyn running as Labour leader and he didn't get voted in, I mean, these were moments of huge shock for a lot of us. And it's because we're trapped in our echo chambers. And echo chambers are the worst things. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag with the internet and what it provides.
Can I ask you, do you feel that having access to the internet makes you feel like you're more in touch with the diaspora? Does it make you feel like you're a part of that diaspora culture?
Hello.
Compare it with that diaspora thing.
Yeah, I think I'd exercise some caution with that, particularly with finding your religion, Islam, or finding more about your religion. I think there's definitely some great spaces to do that, but I'd exercise caution. And I think there's lots of good things, like Soph said, about the internet, but it's not so democratizing a space that it doesn't give...
Thinking. Critical thinking goes all the way. But I don't know how to think critically.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you are. Thank you for the question. Was there anything else? Any other question?
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so on a very base level, I belong to a very liberal art university, we can also say university. But at the same time, my household and my background is very, we can say, conservative and Islamic. So I feel like diasporic dosti means not only कि अगर वो दूर है, if my friend is like in my class, but I feel like there is a much more difference in our backgrounds. One is from a very liberal background and mine is very conservative. I really feel like it took me a lot of effort from my side and from the other side as well to continue that kind of friendship. So yeah, I just wanted to ask what kind of efforts does it took you to continue your friendship like on a very different level, or what are your tips in this case?
What efforts do we make? Is that the... I think we were talking about this earlier, is that we can go for a period of time, like, a couple of months, a few months, maybe just a text or sharing something with each other, and then we can dip right back into it. So we don't put pressure on each other, I think is key. We understand she's got 4 kids and a busy life, and I've got 4 kids and a busy life, and we don't have that toxic element where it's like, acha, you didn't call me for 3 weeks, what's going on? And I think you use this phrase, holding each other gently and knowing how we know each other, knowing what we know of each other, you know which things to steer clear of, and you know what might be happening in the world or what might be happening personally that you think, I should just check in.
there's no judgment.
Yeah.
I think that's the great thing as well. Like, I've made decisions where I know that it runs counter to how Sabina might think or how she might feel about something, but she's never, and she might have a moment where she'll look like, because she can't hide her facial expressions, so I can catch it. But I know that she'll dig deep to still support me, even if she doesn't necessarily always agree. And I think that what you're talking about, having friends that are, I really like that, the way that you put it, that actually you can be from the same place, in the same country, in the same town, in the same college, and still feel like you're some sort of diaspora because there's these distances because of the nature of your lived experiences. I think that's a really beautiful way of thinking about this as well, that diaspora doesn't just mean those who live over there. It can be here as well, in the distances that are created in society, from whether that's, hierarchies of class or gender or religion or whatever. So I think that's a really valuable insight that you've given us. And I think it's so important, actually, to have friends that are from varying backgrounds. I think our context, because we do live as a minority in the UK, and we are a minority that is especially criminalized and made into suspects. I mean, I don't know how many folk heard Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister's recent speech outside Downing Street. I mean, the UK is in the greatest economical, financial mess that it's been in for decades, thanks to consistent conservative rule. COVID was a farce. It was an absolute, the corruption in the UK, contracts to Tory friends, the death rate and the attitude, the sort of necropolitics of the pandemic. I could go on, the refugee crisis. There are so many crises that the UK is currently faced with. It's got small island mentality. And what does Rishi Sunak decide to talk about outside Downing Street? The threat of Islamism on the streets of the UK. It just does not exist in reality in the way that it does in our political class's imaginary. And so then we seek each other out in that kind of context. You seek those that are similar to you, who remind you. I said earlier about being a friend of my mind. It's that you're living in reality. Your experiences are real, and so I guess we have a different sort of need out of our friendships as well. One that reminds us that we're actually not going mad.
And also, I think as well, being silly and having moments of like levity and laughter is also important too. So sometimes, it can be these things are happening, but rather than us having a deep and meaningful conversation about it, I might just call up and say, is it me? Or did you see Rishi Sunak? Isn't he a twat? And we're just, someone to say, yeah, yeah, that's right. He is a twat. So I think just having some silliness as well, and, being free to be yourself. I think probably with Soph, I can be the most free as I can be as a whole person, probably than any other person in my life. I think even, with my husband, I love him. I'm very open and free with him, but it's a different kind of free. It's a different kind of, it's more about thoughts and ideas. Brilliant. This is Soph's book, by the way.
That means my mum is in the audience. There she is.
Oh, great. Just as I swore. Sorry, Auntie. Love you.
She loves us. I think we need to wrap it up now. But what I would like to leave everybody with is just the profound power of friendship. And we often, when we talk about love, we often think about romance. We think about husbands and wives or, that kind of thing. But the greatest romance of my life has been with my girlfriends. And this one sits as the queen on top of all of that. It's the space. Bell Hooks talks about friendship, and especially female friendship. And it's now scientifically proven as well that female friendships provide longevity to one another's lives. Some of the ideas we've had together are questionable and could have shortened our lives at times. We do like to take risks together. But overall, for your mental health, Female friendships are such a special thing, and I just love that we've had a panel on it to honor it and to cherish it, and go and love your girls and celebrate your girls and you guys for the guys.
Thank you.